Let's get ready to chill with Iceman as we break the ice on some of the coolest abilities in Marvel Champions. That's right, in this video we're chatting about Bobby Drake, diving into his hero cards and then ranking him as a Marvel Champions hero. This is going to be primarily a solo review, however I will have some multiplayer thoughts here at the end of the video. That's going to be bookmarked and you can jump directly to that if you would like, and I got some multiplayer thoughts, so make sure to stick around for those. As always, let's start with the Alter Ego and see what Bobby is doing in that pool. In Alter Ego, he has a recovery of 4, 6 hand size, and a pretty hardy 11 HP. He starts the game with 6 Frostbite upgrades which are set aside, and these upgrades are kind of what his kit revolves around, and we're going to be talking a lot about them throughout this video. And one of the ways, I guess the first way that we're going to talk about these, is how his Alter Ego cool off ability or response triggers with these. So whenever you flip to Alter Ego, you can shuffle an ice traded card from your discard pile into your deck for every single copy of Frostbite currently in play. This is really fun, especially when we look at the fact that 13 out of the 15 cards that come in Bobby Drake's pack have the ice trait. So these cards range from important upgrades to all sorts of events that can interact with the game state differently. So that being said, there really isn't a perfect answer to what you should be shuffling in with this ability. I found it to be a pretty tactical decision based on the current game state. So it's kind of fun. Bobby can do a lot. He's very, very flexible, and this is another ability that leans into that flexibility. It's going to be a theme throughout the video of how flexible he can be. When we flip to hero form, Iceman has a 1/2/2 stat line with a 5 hand size. His freeze ability is why I like his kit so much, and the main way we're going to interact with those set aside Frostbites. This ability states that whenever you make a basic attack or defense against an enemy, you can attach a copy of Frostbite to that enemy. And Frostbite is why Iceman is the debuff master. This is an upgrade that gives the attached enemy -1 scheme and -1 attack. Then after they activate, it's a forced response to discard the card. So it's -1/-1 for the activation. However, it's not limited to 1 per enemy. So you can stack up to 6 onto an opponent, which just shuts them down. Now, one of the questions that I had when I started playing Iceman, and I saw a couple other people on the channel ask, is how does this interact with boost cards? Now basically you calculate the total value of the attack or scheme after every single boost card is in effect. So for example, if you have 4 Frostbites on the villain and the villain's attacking for 2 and they draw a boost card with 3 boost icons, the total of that attack would normally be 5. At this point you would recalculate and the Frostbites would take effect -4, so the effective damage going through would be 1. So 2 plus the 3 boost -4, basically the Frostbites act like they affect the boost cards too. This, you can't go negative, but it is all calculated after boost cards are revealed. This can be super great. It gets around Stalwart, which is pretty awesome. It can reduce Scheme, which is awesome, especially for solo play. And you can set it up to have some safe trips down to Alter Ego to trigger the cool off ability. You stack like 3 of them on, flip down, you shuffle those ice cards in, and then now you're scheming for 3 less than a normal scheme, so you're going to probably be pretty safe. There's a ton of flexibility, kind of coming back to that theme. Now let's take a quick second to discuss how this is going to interact when Iceman basic defends. Because freeze is a interrupt, I think I actually may have called it a response earlier in the video, it's an interrupt. It happens before the action. So when you are defending with Iceman, you will declare him as a defender, you will interrupt using that freeze ability, putting a Frostbite onto the villain or the enemy that you're defending against, immediately reducing their attack by 1. So basically it's a defense of 3, and it'll immediately be discarded after the activation in which Iceman is defending. So it's not going to be around for very long, but it will take effect for that activation that he's defending with. One last thing to note about the freeze ability, it's not limited to once per phase, so if we can ready Iceman multiple times, we can trigger freeze every single time he attacks or defends, which is typically pretty advantageous to do. And the benefit of the Frostbite is not the only reason we want to ready him. His stat line of 1/2/2 isn't great, but we do have the Ice Slide upgrade, which gives him aerial and +1 to all his stats. So now that attack is dealing 3 damage, which is pretty ice for a basic activation. I'm going to try and get some more puns in here. Now the downside of Ice Slide is that we have to shuffle this back into our deck when we flip down to Alter Ego. It is a forced response, so there's no getting around it, but if we can time it right, we should be able to get it back pretty soon, especially as we're drawing more cards in Alter Ego. So I like to try and time it so that I'm flipping down with a fairly thin deck so that I can make sure to get it back pretty quickly, because it's a very, very nice card. It is ice and superpower traded, so when we do draw into it, we have a lot of ways to get that back into play by discounting its cost. Superpower being depth focus, and we'll talk about a couple more ways when we discuss basic cards, but Iceman does have his power belt. This is his own resource generator for ice traded cards. Again, 13 cards of his kit are ice traded, which we can recur using his alter ego ability. And so using this resource generator, we're going to be doing it a lot. It also gives him 3 HP, which is nice, but in a lot of my games, because of the frostbite mechanic, his starting 11 HP, health is not what I'm super concerned about protecting when I'm playing Iceman. The 3 HP is nice, however, it's not necessary. The last card in his kit that doesn't have the ice trait is probably the most important card in his entire kit. That's Cryokinetic Perception. This is a 2-cost superpower upgrade that states when you resolve his hero ability, you can exhaust this card to draw a card. That right there is probably worth the cost. You're more than likely going to be triggering this ability every single round, so this is basically a 2-cost mansion. But then, if the card you drew has the ice trait, you can ready Iceman. So you get a built-in ready, meaning that you can attack again for 3 and attach another frostbite. Now, you do have to exhaust cryokinetic. You can't just do this all the time. That'd be crazy. But it is really, really good. The value you get out of this upgrade is insane. Get it onto the table as soon as you can, because your gameplay changes after it's played. It's a friction resistance. It's one of those key upgrades that you have to get onto the table, and then your entire kit kind of feels like, okay, now we're rolling. Bobby has some other ways to add frostbites to enemies with his cards, like his Arctic Attack. This is a flexible 2-cost superpower ice traded card that basically you have 2 options when you play it. You can either deal 4 damage to an enemy and attach a set-aside copy of Frostbite, or if the enemy already has a Frostbite attached, you can deal 6 damage to the enemy. I really do like the flexibility here. If you choose the second option, you're hitting the damage efficiency we like to see out of a card, or you can do slightly less damage and debuff the attacked enemy. Iceman has a lot of tactical decisions that need to be made, and can be a fun one. One of the most fun ways I've seen this card be used is to hit a minion with the first option. So deal 4 damage. It didn't destroy the minion, but now there's a frostbite attached to it. And when we flip down, we can use cool off. We get more card recursion because now there's another frostbite out there. And then that minion is scheming for 1 less. So minions are not typically the big schemers in the game. So if that minion, I think it actually had a 2 scheme, and so now it's just scheming for 1. So at that point, the threat being added by that minion is not too bad. And then as you flip up, because you already did 4 damage to them, they're super ready to be hit in the face for the following turn. And so I really like that interaction, but a lot of the times I'm either using it as a game end card with that 6 damage straight to the villain's face, or to get some more of those frostbites out. Chill Out is his thwart card. It's a 2-cost card for 3 threat removal, and then you can attach a frostbite to an enemy. You do get 3 of these in his kit, which is awesome because we really want to be using our basic activation for attacking or defending so that we can trigger freeze. We don't get to do it when we thwart. So having an extra copy of this thwart card, 3 copies, is really awesome. Also in solo, 3 threat per player is kind of that magic number. So many side schemes, especially the player side schemes, come in with 3 threat per player, and so this is going to be a perfect thwart target for a lot of those side schemes. If I am not running Justice, this is a card that I will target pretty frequently for his cool off ability to shuffle back in and just get more thwarting, so I don't have to use that basic activation to thwart. Next up, we're going to talk about the most fun card in his entire kit. That's Ice Blast. This is AoE damage. The way that it works is you choose a player and attach a frostbite to the villain and every minion engaged with that player. Then every enemy with a frostbite attached takes 3 damage. This can clear so many minions. It's insane. But also, fun fact, the frostbite does not need to be added with this ability. Now, this is probably more of a multiplayer nuance because you're going to choose yourself in a solo play. But if you have a minion in front of another player with Frostbite that you've added via an Arctic attack or a basic activation, and then you choose yourself with this ability, their minion also takes damage. So cool. This is great because I've also found that I don't really like attacking minions with Iceman or his events. When I attack, I add a Frostbite, which means I don't really want to defeat an enemy with that attack. So I want to be attacking the villain a lot to load Frostbites up on the villain, and then when I need to take out like an armored guard with my attack, I lose my freeze ability benefit for that. So to circle back to the alter ego ability, if we're playing like a mutagen or a Zola or someone with a ton of minions in their kit, this is a really good target to shuffle back in, because then you can clear the path to attack and trigger freeze on the villain. Because once you clear a minion, you're losing so much. Well, I guess you're not, but it feels like you are. It feels like you are. The next card we're going to talk about is Frozen Solid. This is a 3-cost upgrade that attaches to an enemy when they would activate. Instead, you discard Frozen Solid and attach a Frostbite to that enemy. This works on Stalwart Villains. This cancels Stalwart Villains activations. Insane. This is also probably more of a multiplayer card, because in solo, unless I'm really trying to preserve the Frostbites that I have on the villain, I don't have a huge issue mitigating the villain's activations. And with how expensive his kit already is, and don't worry, we'll talk about that, it often feels like you're playing like 2 cards a turn once you're totally built out with your generators. And this card is doing something that an ally can do with a chump block, or I can stack Frostbites onto the villain. I don't really need to cancel their attack. This is kind of thrown out the window with some villains, of course, but I do like this card a lot more in multiplayer, where you can protect a player, have Frostbites protect another player, and so it feels just like a little bit more symbiotic with more heroes at the table. And at this point, you may realize that I really like the protect the table build that Iceman can put up, and we'll talk about that more. Speaking of protecting the table, we have Ice Wall. This is a 4-cost support that states when an identity would take any amount of damage from an attack, you place that damage on this support instead. Then if there are 8 or more damage on the card, you discard it and attach a copy of Frostbite to the enemy that just attacked. This can be crazy, especially if you game it, because if you have 7 damage here and the villain hits you for 500 damage, all 500 of that damage is going to be soaked into the wall, because you only check after the damage has been dealt. So you'll place 507 damage on Ice Wall and then it goes away. This is so freaking cool. It's also insane for a perfect defense build, because you can defend, and even if like a damage or 2 slips through, it goes onto Ice Wall, and you can still trigger like all your upgrades, because that excess damage slips into Ice Wall and not to your hero. I actually have a deck that I think I'm playing tonight as of the video coming out. And so if I remember, I'll go in and link that game down below, because I'm really looking forward to that. Last card we're going to talk about are his snow clones. Bobby has 2 signature allies, both of which are snow clones. I call them snow cones. These are 2-cost X-Men allies that cannot thwart or have attachments. They have 2 attack and 2 health. However, they take -1 consequential damage when they're attacking an enemy with a Frostbite attached. This is not a difficult ability to trigger. There's going to be so many Frostbites around. These snow cones are going to stay on the table for a while. These are really, really good allies. They're super cheap. They're Ice and X-Men traded, so you can pay for them using like your power belt, team building exercise. You can recur them with cool off. They trigger Utopias, which readies Iceman, which hits freeze again. And once they're out, they're basically +4 attack every single turn. They remind me of like Domino's pistols that can also chump block in a pinch. They're awesome allies, and they're tied for the cheapest part of his kit. And this is where the excitement starts to slow down a little bit. Let's talk about the cost curve. We have the most expensive kits in the entire game. Look at the graph on the screen right now. There are 0 cards that cost less than 2 in Iceman's kit. He has an average cost of 2.4 per card. That is a lot, like a lot. Now, we do have a lot of great keywords on those cards that we can use to discount these costs, but we still need to get those generators into play. Iceman's cards are awesome. There's no doubting that, but it can be really cost prohibitive kit and his biggest downside. But We talked a lot about the generators, so let's move and transition to talk about some of the basic cards. These are some of the cards that I really like running with Iceman, regardless of aspect. And so the generators that I was talking, and I've talked about a couple of these before, but X-Gene, right? We have some really, really cool signature events that X-Gene can help pay for. Since we're flipping down, unless we're doing like a perfect defense build, Bobby's going to be flipping fairly frequently to get some of those cards recurred. So you're going to have a chance to play X-Gene and help pay for some of those events. X-Jet is really good. Def Focus, he has 9 superpower targets in his kit, so Def Focus is pretty much an auto include for me. And then Team Building Exercise. This is the big one. He came with Team Building Exercise in his precon, so I'm not breaking new ground here, but I just wanted to call it out. Team Building Exercise is really good. I typically run 2 Team Building Exercises in my Iceman builds, because not only does he have the Ice trait, so you can use it to pay for those 13 cards in his kit, but also X-Men trait. And so now we can run X-Men, which triggers Utopia. So if you want to ready and trigger Freeze again, Utopia does so, and Team Building Exercise is going to discount the cost of those X-Men allies to do so. So cheap X-Men allies are great. Beak is amazing, came in his kit. I had to carve out a little piece of this to talk about Beak. Beak is so freaking good. Run Beak in pretty much every single one of your X-Men decks. It's so good. Superpower training for Cryokinetic Perception is a good call. I want to get Cryokinetic early. Superpower helps me. And then if I am able to draw into Cryokinetic on turn 1, I feel really good. But then Superpower always has a target for like Frozen Solid. And I'm going to trade 3 threat for a Frozen Solid pretty much any day of the week. And so I pretty much always run Superpower training. Alrighty, let's talk about the aspects. Now, we're going to rank the aspects in terms of what he's least good in to what he's best in. And then when we get to my favorite aspect, I will call that out. Let's start with 4th place. We have Aggression. Aggression brings a lot of tools to handle minions, and this is what I like to supplement Iceman's kit when I'm running in red. He does have Ice Blast, which is nice, but now we can bring even more event cards to help out with minion control, and we don't have to rely so heavily on that blast. We also did get Glob and Shark Girl in his precon. Glob is nice, but Shark Girl swinging for like 6 on the villain, followed up with Snow Cones, it's insane. Like that's a really fun build. Just throw as many of the upgrades, the Frostbite upgrades out there, and let Shark Girl just clear. Aggression is here, and it may be influenced in my playstyle on how I've adopted to play Bobby. He is so controlling. He can control the game, and by using his basic attacks and debuffing the villain to infinity seems to work really well here, that the added damage that red aspects brings is not totally needed. Let's move on to the 3rd, and that's going to be Justice. Iceman can handle thwarting pretty well with his allies, which stay around a lot because you don't really need to chump block too much with Iceman. Also, the 3 copies of Chill Out are great thwarting options for him. So Justice brings ways to supplement that. The other kind of thing that I'm thinking about with Justice is Justice brings a lot of Confuse, which I don't find as useful in Bobby because the Frostbites also affect the villain scheming. While Confuse is still nice, it's not as necessary as some of the other heroes that we've seen in the past. All that to be said, one way or another is a great way to help get more money to pay for his expensive kit, and my favorite card in the yellow aspect is Upside the Head, which states that when we attack an enemy, we can confuse it. If they're already confused, we can stun them. And because we want to be attacking with Bobby, we can use this to preserve those frostbites if we want to. And there's a couple of different ways to play Bobby. Sometimes you don't want to be, you know, having all of them out all the time. You want to be flexible with where you can put them. Sometimes you want to just uber control, leave them out, and just like, I'm invincible. So being able to have confuse and attack with something that we already want to be doing, basic activation with Upside the Head, I really like that for an uber control game. In second place, we have my favorite way to play Iceman, and that's Protection. He has a couple of ways to do this. He has the Always Be Ready build with like What Doesn't Kill Me, Ever Vigilant, because he has Aerial once Ice Slide is out. We have ways to ready, and so the more times that we ready, the more times we can activate his ability, which means that he's going to just be more and more efficient. Protection is very, very good with Iceman. my favorite actual way to play him is the perfect defense build. You just don't take damage, right? With an armored vest, you basically have a defense of 4, and then if you have more frostbites out, that's even less. And then if you drop a wall, like the ice wall, you're just gonna be fine for the rest of the game. Like, you just don't take damage, and then you can trigger all your fun defensive upgrades. I love this playstyle. It is so much fun. Yeah. But the best aspect is leadership. Protection provides so many ways to ready, but leadership can also do this with ally recursion and utopia. So Iceman rarely needs to chump block, which means that we can use our allies for other things like strength in numbers, extra damage, or extra thwarting. We have a lot of ally slots with Triskelion and Utopia. Uncanny X-Men is incredibly powerful, right? It helps you get your allies out for cheaper and helps them keep you around because they're going to have higher health pools, which we care about with Iceman because our health is the number of activations that we're going to be using, because Iceman can just protect them. And we can just put a ton of them in play with Make the Calls. My favorite target here, and probably maybe slightly biased on why I think he's the best here, is Mirage. Because Mirage, when she enters play, you stun an enemy whose scheme is less than her thwart of 2. Iceman. Frostbites reduce the scheme value, which means that you're pretty much always going to have a good target for Mirage. She's going to be able to stun, and leadership is just so freaking good for Iceman. Let's talk about what the community had. The community has protection as Iceman's best aspect, and that's super valid. I totally see that. I think leadership provides a little bit more flexibility, and he's a monster in green, he's a monster in blue. They're both very, very good. They also ranked him as an A tier, and I am going to go a little bit lower and drop him into the B tier in between SPDR and Wolverine. Iceman is a blast to play. The control he's able to bring to the table with his freeze ability is super fun and pretty unique. Readying him over and over can load frostbites and pretty much ignore the villain. That's so satisfying. He does play a little differently than other heroes. He has different pacing than a lot of heroes. Trying to understand and figure out when to status lock to preserve the frostbites, to flip down, to recur some cards is a really fun timing puzzle. Where he loses out on power is the cost of his cards. So while you can discount them pretty heavily, his kit is so expensive. He can struggle to get going against some of those harder villains who throw the world at you to start the game. That being said, I am super, super happy with Iceman, and that's going to lead me into my multiplayer thoughts. Because in multiplayer, he's my new favorite multiplayer hero to play. He's now officially beaten out Cyclops, who previously held that spot. And after seeing how he interacts with multiple heroes at the table, it's just my playstyle through and through. I love Iceman in multiplayer. I love him in solo, but I love him in multiplayer. Ice Wall protects everyone at the table. It's so satisfying just deleting minions with Ice Blast, which you typically have a better target for in multiplayer, because you can Ice Blast not just yourself. Say if someone else drew like 4 minions, that's so much damage. It's so efficient damage. I love protection in the 4-player. I would say protection is his best aspect in multiplayer settings, whereas leadership is probably his best in solo play. He can just support the table so very well. He can do a perfect defense build. He can defend for like 3 to 4 players. Not necessarily like the classic sense of defending, but using frostbites, basic defense, supplemented by readies with cryokinetic perception, frozen solids, blocking activation. He can just shut down the villain multiple times every single round and control the entire table. And in multiplayer, there's typically a little bit more time to build, so you can get your generators onto the table easier, making the rest of the game smooth sailing. Insane multiplayer hero. And if you're new to multiplayer or two-handed play, I would encourage you to try him out with Cyclops. Cyclops is also just an incredible multiplayer hero. They're my top 2. But since the frostbites and the frozen solids count as upgrades, Cyclops can use his optic blast with them. Plus, it's just a blast, pun intended, to have them at the table together. Just like seeing them side to side is pretty cool. Let me know if you play it and let me know how it goes. That's going to be it for the Iceman review. Thank you so very much for hanging out. Thanks for watching. I appreciate y'all. It means a lot to support the channel. Y'all are amazing. So let me know what you think about Iceman down in the comments. I'm looking forward to talking with him and see if you all like him as much as I do, because I think he's an absolute blast to play. I appreciate y'all. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time. Peace.